So it's lesson 7, part 2. We've set up our form for editing. I managed to get my application running on port 3000. I just kill all my node processes and start it again, and now I can run on port 3000. So we can get to edit, but our form is blank. So in our controller, we're passing in this car object, so we now can access the make, model, year, and color properties, and we can display those in our form. So in our first input box for make, we can simply set the value, and we can inject the server-side value using our EJS tag. So how would we display the make property here? What would go in this tag? We're passing in an object called car. So how would we reference it here? Look one more time at our method. We're loading the edit view, and we're passing in an object called car. So the car has 4 properties, and we need to display each one of them in the appropriate box. So what would go in here? And my code hinting recognizes the make property that we set up in our car schema. So this should inject the car make into the first text box. We can just refresh in the browser and check, make sure that works before we go and do the remaining 3 properties the same way. So if I refresh, we get the make. Right, so this seems to work. I can click edit beside any car, and the make is getting printed in the first text box. So now we want to do the same thing for our other 4 fields. Set up the value. Our model.
Are we going to set action for this?
Good question. Just be one sec. Just want to make sure all my fields load. Right. So color doesn't show up because we didn't give any of these a color. No problem. So if the field's null, it doesn't cause an error. Okay. So that's a good question. We haven't set up. There's no action here. So if we don't set up an action, if I click save right now, what is the URL that it's going to post to? The same one. What URL do we want it to post to?
Sorry. Edit. Edit.
Yep.
Like it should go to control.
It will go to the controller, but we're just talking about what the URL does it need. So I guess the question is, right now you said it will post to itself. It'll post to that same URL, cars/edit with that ID. You're right, that is what it'll do. So if we do it right now, we get a 404 because there's no post handler, right? This is what we would expect. So my question is this URL okay to post? Can we post to this URL and process the update, or do we need an action so that it goes somewhere else? So it did a post. How can you tell it's a post and not a get?
Because it doesn't show in the URL.
Right. So the node forms by default will actually post. They're set up that way, even without setting up. Oh, sorry. We did specify a post, but we didn't specify an action. So do we need an action? Or is this URL, is it okay for us to submit, basically it's called the self-posting form, post back to the same URL rather than a different one? Yeah, it will be okay.
Yeah.
Right? We've got a get handler at this URL. Now we can just write a post handler at the same URL, save the changes to MongoDB, and redirect to index. Right? Our ASP.NET forms work the same way. We had a get and a post at the same URL, right, for both create and edit. In PHP, we posted usually to a different page. It was a little bit simpler when we were kind of learning this stuff to have two pages. Here's our form. Here's our page that processes the form. We don't really need to do that now. It's probably more efficient. Just let's do it all on one. There's nothing wrong if you wanted to set up like an update URL, no problem. We could do the post there. We probably don't need to. So it's not wrong to add an action. You certainly can if you want to, but it isn't necessary.
Like if you want to add action, and it should be the same URL, so it's not going to change, right?
Yeah, so we could specify the action as /cars/edit and then inject the ID on the end. That would be fine, but that happens automatically, so it's really not necessary to include. If you do, it certainly won't break anything, and we'll get the exact same result. Now, we don't need to even put the ID into a hidden field for that exact reason. If it posts to itself, we still have the ID in the request parameters. So we've basically got 5 values we need. We have the ID, that's in the request parameter, it's in the URL. And then we have the 4 properties that are in the request body. So we're getting 5 values, 1 from the URL and 4 from the form. That's fine. That's one of the other benefits to posting to itself. If we posted to another page, we would lose the ID unless we stuck it in the form somewhere. But by staying on the same page, the ID will stay in our URL. So now we just need our post method. /cars/edit ABC123. We're going to post the /edit/ and then our ID. Our request, response, and next. Now there are several different kind of versions of update that are available with Mongoose. So again, we'll get the ID from the URL. Just like we've done with delete and like we did when we loaded the edit page. Each time request.params._ID, that'll give us the ID value. And now we're going to fill a car object from our form. So this is similar to when we created. So then we're going to use Mongoose. We're going to call Mongoose's update method. Daniel? Nope, it is not. Thank you. Mongoose has an update method. The first parameter is much like find by ID, pass in the ID. Second parameter we're going to pass in is our car that has all of the new values. So some of these may have been changed and some may not have been changed. The user can change one value or they could change 2, 3, or all 4. And then we just evaluate if we get any error here. But we'll log out any error. If we have no error, what are we going to do after we update the document? Yeah, let's just redirect to the index view. So we're not loading a view here. We're just processing a change to MongoDB and taking the user back to the index page. This is not the only way to do an update. If you look at the Mongoose documentation, there's a find one and update method, or we could do find and then we can set values. There's several different ways you can do this. This isn't the only way.
And that way we don't use like different guest imports or like what?
Yeah, we do, because we use get to load the existing car into our form, and then we use post after the user's made the changes and submitted. Then the post is running. So we grab the ID from the URL, we populate a car with all of the new values from the form, and then rather than calling create, we're calling update. So update, so pass in all the new values for the car with this ID, right? So the ID doesn't change, but all the other properties are being updated from whatever's in our form. So let's see what happens here. Raj, what color is Panka's car?
Black.
So I'll leave the other values, but I'm going to update the color value from empty and give it a value. At least I'm going to try, but something's going to break. Oh, okay. It says, hold on, doesn't like this. It's trying to modify ID here. So we may have to rewrite this a little bit. That's interesting. Why is it trying to update my ID field? We may have to do this in a different way. So that is going to hang. I'll just stop that. We'll have to rewrite this. Okay, well, let's see what Mongoose has to say. We may have to rewrite our update. Okay, so we could call find. All right, well, we'll maybe rewrite this a different way. Okay. Let's see, we'll comment that. We'll comment out this block as well. We'll try a different method. So then we use so there's our filter. So there's like our where clause, and then we use the set command. We'll try this. And we'll try it this way. We'll try it this way. So this is our where clause or ID. We're going to set each property. This null just represents options, which we're not passing in any options. So it could be options like only update the first matching record. We'll try it this way and see. This doesn't work. We may have to try the find and update method. So it's kind of like the reverse of an SQL command. In an SQL command, update command, we set all the properties we want to change, and then we have a where clause at the end indicating which records we want to update. With Mongoose, the update is reversed. First, we set out the condition, what records we want to update, and then we set out the properties. I'll try this again. I don't know if it's going to work or not. We're going to find out. Let's see. Okay, well, no error. Now, we don't know whether the update actually ran, which it did. Here, let's give Pank a new car. He's been a good boy. Let's upgrade his car a little bit. How about a 2019? We'll just make sure that changing something else works. Okay, so we'll go with the version that actually works. So there's our whole post handler. So this first part is our where clause, and then these are all the values we're going to update. So even if the user only changes one value, we're going to update all of them. We don't need to keep track of which values they changed and which ones they didn't. So if the old car was a BMW and the new value is still a BMW, it's no problem to update the value from BMW to BMW. That's okay. It's too much trouble to try and track only the fields that were changed and update those. May as well just update all of them. So now we've got our working kind of CRUD operation. Should make sure we can still do everything. Hey, good news. We bought you a new car while you were out. We upgraded you.
2019.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. We should make sure our ad still works as well, probably. But we can still add. So now all our CRUD operations are functioning. So it's all working locally. It is a bit of a pain to run this off our local database for two reasons. One, as you could tell me, right? You got to run this, you have to run the server every time. Did you get it running eventually? Okay. The other thing is obviously this only works locally. So if I then go and deploy my site to Heroku or Azure, it isn't going to be able to connect to a local database. So our way of solving this is use an online database. Then we could take this, I could deploy it to GitHub, commit it with continuous deployment to Azure or Heroku, and then I can use live data. So that's better. That's what we're going to want to do, obviously, for your second assignment in the class. So all we need to do really, because here's one of the beauties of MongoDB. Normally, let's say we were working with MySQL or SQL Server. We have an application, we build it locally, now we need to put it online. So we need to deploy our web application online. What do we have to do with the database if we've been working with a local database? Yeah, so we either have to recreate it or we have to do some kind of export off our local server and import onto our live server. With MongoDB, if we don't need the data, we just need the database. Remember, there's no schema. So we can just create a database on mLab and start dumping data into it. Change our connection string and start putting data in, and it will start building the new collections. We don't have to set up those collections ahead of time. So I ask you, so probably everybody has set up an mLab account. If you haven't, you can quickly go to mlab.com. This used to be called MongoLab, and they had to rename it. So it's a database as a service used by massive companies. We talked about MongoDB's massive scaling ability, but like Azure and Heroku, they're good enough to give us a free section, single instance on a server. It doesn't really scale, but we don't have to pay for it. So log into your MongoDB account. If you haven't signed up, it's like a 1-minute sign up, just like Heroku. Just create a password and verify your email and you're set up. So I've got a bunch of old databases here. So what I'm going to do is create a new database. So here are your options. So what we want, you need to pick the sandbox. So that's our free, up to 0.5 gig of data for free. So notice they don't run the servers themselves. They have servers with Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. So if you're paying, you can choose any one of these as the provider. So let's pick our sandbox. So the sandbox is on AWS, and you have to pick one of the two locations. So the available locations are US East or Europe. So I click continue. I'll pick US, doesn't really matter. And I'll click the continue button. So it asks me for a database name. Well, I'll call mine Car Tracker. Why not? That's what we're building. And I'll just click submit order. And they'll build a free database for us. Now you can see I have quite a few databases on here. It hasn't told me I've hit my limit yet, so that's good. I could probably get rid of some of the old ones, but we get more free databases than you do through, for example, your Azure Imagine account. There's a limit. Not here. So my database is up and running. It's really quick, tells me it's online. So I'm just going to click on it. Now there are no collections here, as we might expect. But before we can connect to it, you notice, so we've got two warnings here. There's no redundancy and not suitable for production. So it's not copied or replicated on another server in case this server crashes. So they're saying, we don't recommend this if it's a production application. That's okay. We're not building a production app, we're just learning. The other warning I do have to pay attention to, a database user is required. So we've got a blank database, and just like with our Azure database, we have to set up a credential. Our local MongoDB, we didn't need a username and password, but obviously with our mLab one, we need a username and password. So we need to set that up, and we probably should store those credentials in a file. So I'm going to click on the Users tab and click the Add Database User here. So I will call this so create the user, and then what I suggest you do is put that user account in a little text file so that you remember that login. So I'll just create a quick file here. DB is car tracker. Just turn off my screen share for a sec. Put in my password. I don't care if you see it. I'm not going to publish it to YouTube. And my server, my host, is right here. So it gives me a database name, and it runs on the same port number. I'm just going to save this file. I'll just make a little docs folder here, and then I'll add that to my git ignore later so it doesn't get uploaded to GitHub. Just save it as a text file. So I've got that credential stored somewhere. So now from my mLab panel, it actually gives us, here's the connection string that needs to go in our node code. So just copy it. And now I'll go to my config globals file. I'm going to comment out my local connection and paste in my mLab connection. I'll comment that one out. So now all you need to do is replace the placeholders for user and password and take out the angled brackets as well. Those are there to show you those are placeholders. Put in the username and put in your password. So again, I'll just do that without my screen share. So my username, password, server name, and that's the database. Again, make sure you take out the angled brackets around the user and password fields. Now my NodeMon's restarted my server. So now we should be able to load our car tracker, except our cars page will be blank. Right? We have cars in our local database. So I'll go back to the home page. Everything works. When I click on cars, I'm not going to see anything though, because now we're connected to mLab. There's nothing in it. We have cars locally, but as soon as we switch that connection, we get nothing. So now we want to test, can we add a car to mLab? Right? There's no collections. Right? If I click on collections, it's blank. But if I add Raj told us your car's black. So even without creating a cars collection in the database, we can start adding data to it. We can add documents. If I refresh here, notice I now have a cars collection with one document. I can actually view it through here. If I click on it, it shows me a JSON object. And I can do things like I could import or export. So if I have a bunch of data in JSON format, I could import it through the mLab portal. Or I could export. So under tools, you can import. I have data in a CSV. I could import it here. So my customer gives me a list of products, for example, in an Excel spreadsheet. I could browse in here and upload them, which would be convenient. So we can go add a few other cars. We can add, we can edit. Just like before, may as well make sure our delete works as well. We should test all of these. Make sure our little confirmation works. If I click cancel. So moving this to using mLab is really easy. Now I can I could turn off my local MongoDB. I'm not using it anymore. Right? So we don't need to do this. If we're just going to work with mLab moving forward, that's good. We don't have to bother running our local MongoDB. No problem. We're not using it anymore. And now I can upload this, which I'll do shortly. I can push this to GitHub. It'll deploy to Azure and Heroku, and my data is going to run live online. I'll maybe add one more car here. But now we've got a working application, does full CRUD, and our data is hosted online, which is where we want it to be. So using mLab is really simple. It's probably easier to use mLab, in fact, than it is to run things locally. It's quite fast. It's not slow like our Azure connection with Imagine. It's pretty slow. And also, we don't have to do things like with our with Azure, with our SQL Server, how our firewall's locked down and we have to open up the firewall to allow remote connections. mLab doesn't require any of that. I mean, that only took us, what, 5 minutes to create a database, put in our connection, and we're done. So one of the things you'll need to do for assignment 2, which I think I'll give out next week, is obviously you need to use a database on mLab. So basically the whole assignment in a nutshell is create a CRUD application that also requires authentication, and that's what we'll do over the next 2 weeks. So anonymous users can see the data, but they won't be able to add, edit, or delete anything unless they sign up and log in. So you may want to start to think about something you might like to build with Node. I'm going to leave it up to you. So what's a CRUD application you might want to build using Node, Express, and MongoDB? That's basically what you'll have to do for your second assignment. Okay. So what I think we'll do, I'm going to push my code up to GitHub just to make sure that this runs live now. I need to add my little docs folder to my gitignore, so I'm not publishing my credential because my repository is public. I'm just going to open up my gitignore. And I will add my docs folder here. I'm going to add my files and commit them. CRUD with mLab +7. And I'm going to try to push this, and then we can see our card tracker online. Our visitors should be arriving shortly. They'll only be here for a few minutes. We'll take a break, and then I'm going to have you guys, the last part of class, going to have you guys try to do add some additional CRUD functionality into our card tracker on your own. Hang on, I'll come over in just a second, okay? I should probably add a README file here because I cannot remember my... So we'll see if this has been deployed successfully and if I can do create, read, update, and delete online now. Then I should probably create a little README file. Okay, so here's my home page. So yeah, we can pull the data from mLab, and I can go in and add a new car. So I can add, edit, and delete, and my whole application's running online. Okay, so everything's on GitHub. I'll create a README file as well. So I'm going to pause the video stream.